Yes, that Catholic children would be better educated if they went to an Episcopalian school or whatever the case may be, or a Muslim school. But certainly what works best for them is to be educated within a context that reinforces their self-esteem and their self-concept. That has never been done on any substantial or significant scale on behalf of children of African descent. Even during a time before Brown versus the Board of Education, when we did have black children being educated in a black context, but it wasn't African-centered. It was mostly religious-based or religious-oriented, but even that was better than having them in a situation where they're depicted as inferior. That's what we've got to undo. We've got to undo the damage that has been done to black children by causing them to feel that they are innately inferior and that that inferiority is evidenced by the color of their skin. And might I say this also, you notice that I mentioned the things that we wanted to prioritize. The people that, if we're challenging anybody at all, we're challenging black adults who would profess to be responsible. We're saying to black adults that they need to stand up and take notice and be held accountable. No one is talking these days about the extent to which black children in America, especially in the urban areas of America, have been denied the right to a childhood. Our children have to grow up real fast. How many of you watch animal? I love to watch nature programs. And one of the things that I'm fascinated by is how quickly, for example, wildebeest, brand new, newly born wildebeest, have to be able to not only stand up, but be able to run. Their survival depends upon them being able to stand up and run within minutes of being born. And they've got to run fast enough to keep up with the herd of wildebeest, adult wildebeest. Similarly, black children being born into America's urban neighborhoods and ghettos, as they're called, have to learn to grow up real fast and be able to move and groove in order to survive in that particular environment. That should not be necessary. It is the responsibility of adults to assure children a period, especially in the early years of their lives, when all they have to do is enjoy being alive, fun and frolic. And that's what we want adult black people who profess to be responsible to step up to the plate and express a willingness to do. And we are willing to lead the way, if you will.
Can you just address something for me?
Sure.
I don't mean to offend anybody here, but when I hear some of the...
We're not easily offended either.
Okay, I'm glad. 'Cause I'm easy to offend. Now, I hear some of the things that you're saying that in some cases that African-American children are inherently somehow different from Eurocentric children, so therefore would thrive better in a particular environment in which they could grow up because they're predisposed and ready to grow up like that. Sometimes I feel like if a white person were to say something like that white kids are different from black kids, or that they're predisposed to act a particular way, or physically ready or mentally ready for a particular thing, that people would become very defensive about that sort of thing. So correct me if I'm wrong, are you saying something different from that here?
Yes, I'm usually saying something different from what other people say, and I appreciate the sincerity of your question and the way that you've expressed it. But we have to be careful, sir, that we do not allow ourselves to use those kinds of innately and inherently challenging questions to sort of neutralize the ability of black folks to address ourselves and express ourselves in ways that is important to us for our growth and development. The difference is, in terms of what you say, is white folks are not in a position of being an oppressed group of people in America. So there is no need for people to talk about ways to enforce white people's self-esteem as a race. We're not talking here about individual self-esteem separate and apart from one's group. We're talking about the self-esteem that itself evolves from one's group affiliation or one's being a part of a group. It is almost impossible in America and in the Western world for a black child to evolve without having an innate or feeling an innate sense of inferiority because of the power and social relationship between people who are white and people who are black. Now, if you want to change it so that blacks no longer need to put a focus on why we need to do things that are identifiably black, then somehow or other you've got to bring in some parity. And that's what we're seeking to do, and not seeking to demand that you do it for us. We're saying that this is our responsibility. If we would get up off the ground, we got to get up ourselves and not expect someone else to lift us up.
Do you have meetings scheduled with the President or with Secretary Duncan?
No, nor will we be seeking to meet with either the President or Secretary Duncan. The reading of proclamations, which we intend to do in the vicinity of the White House, we're told that we will not be permitted. They no longer permit people, not just a slight against us. They no longer, since 9/11, they no longer permit people to make speeches or gather in front of the White House. So somewhere in the vicinity of the White House, we will read a proclamation that will be addressed to the President in his capacity as the President of the current, or the head man of the current administration, and the policy influencer of that administration. Similarly, when we read our proclamation at or near the U.S. Department of Education, it will be to address ourselves to the person who has been put in charge of guiding the direction that this country will be going for the next 4 years at least, if not 8, with respect to education. So we want both of those gentlemen to know how important we feel it is that each one and both of them, acknowledge the significance and the importance of an African-centered education for children of African descent. We are clearly not going there looking for or begging for handouts. However, we will be pointing out the fact that there should be no more of a bias or prejudice against people who are practitioners of African-centered education with respect to public funding for that education than there is with any other group of people in this country.
Can you explain a little bit how that's happening now in terms of the funding and how the focus of the school or this type of education is funded differently?
Well, there is no funding for African-centered education. What has happened is that in many cases when someone has suggested, for example, we're a public school. Ours is a public charter school. When I first proposed the idea 12 years ago that we should apply for a charter to operate an African-centered school, the first reaction was that the system will never give us a charter to operate an African-centered school. And I said, well, if I can't get a charter to operate an African-centered school, then I don't need to be getting a charter to operate any kind of school, because that's the kind of school that I feel would serve the best interests of the children who everybody admits are being most egregiously undereducated, if educated at all. So after we sought that. The idea, sister, is that most people feel that an African-centered, not feel, I don't want to say they feel, most people will act as though an African-centered education has some sort of inherent, and this was implied in the question that you asked earlier too, sir, some sort of racism in reverse. Our position is that this has nothing to do with racism in reverse. This has to do with common sense. If, in fact, children suffer because they have been led to believe that their skin color denotes inferiority, then something needs to be done to correct that erroneous assessment, because that is not true. Their Creator did not send them into the world cursed with a skin that supposedly represents inferiority. So someone has to face that. Now, if everyone says that to do that constitutes reverse racism, then that means that we will leave the status quo in place with those children continuing on a downward and backward spiral. We're standing up to say that there's no truth to any of those rumors. And furthermore, the primary responsibility for seeing to it that those misconceptions are eradicated and eliminated falls on adult black people themselves, especially if those black adults consider themselves to be responsible. So what we